This is the SPIA Aerospace Career Enhancement Program. It's part of the SPIA Professional, and the intent of this program is to really promote and enhance the workforce training and education in Washington State for the aerospace industry. And what we really want to commit to is providing that development and instructor training for aerospace professionals and industry experts needing to maintain or gain new skills. Before we start, we do have 2 poll questions, and Justin will be putting one in the poll. The first one, what's your aerospace experience? So we want to get this info and just kind of see what the audience is out there. Wow, so it looks like we have 24%, I think was the highest for 20 plus years. And then the next poll is, what's your SPIA experience? Oh, 77% of SPIA members. Awesome. So before we this is a video that was created by the SPIA ACE program, and we wanted to do a reveal here in this meeting. And it talks about a little bit more of the ACE program and some testimonies from our mentors and instructors and mentees.
The aerospace industry is big, and it's only going to get bigger.
SPIA is the professional engineering union for aerospace. We support some 14,000 engineers and technical workers all over the country.
SPIA ACE offers many different opportunities and programs for students of all different backgrounds that are accessible and can help them achieve a successful career in aerospace.
The SPIA ACE scholarship has helped me develop over the past 6 months.
While professors focus more on the academic sides of educational growth, a mentor has the real-time job experience and industry insight.
And I got matched with Gracie, and so far it's been wonderful.
I want my work to be valued, and that's what I learned through the mentorship program.
We offer classes for folks all across the state of Washington, anyone who's looking to enhance their aerospace career, whether it's students, retirees, folks working in various aerospace companies, all of them.
Being part of SPIA ACE has helped me throughout my application process, as well as preparing for transition to a 4-year university.
All of SPIA ACE offerings are free. Classes, mentorship opportunities, scholarship application opportunities, and other educational content, it's all free.
Another thing that the ACE program offers is not just for mentees, but for mentors. It's a great thing to be able to share your experience, whether you have 1, 2, 20, 30 years, because you always have experiences that someone can learn from.
I also learned a lot about prioritizing. What do you want for your career and your own life? What's a healthy balance? And how do I know when I'm doing too much?
SPIA ACE's mission is to make aerospace accessible to all students from all different backgrounds.
We help them out by offering scholarships, childcare, the opportunity to explore different programs.
Getting into SPIA was one of the stepping stones for my career, especially networking is such a big part of succeeding and making a successful career.
If you want to go into aerospace, you have to look into SPIA ACE.
Thinking about a career in aerospace? Are you already a student or aerospace professional? Visit aerocareer.org to learn how SPIA ACE can help you enhance your skills and career.
Awesome, thank you. And I did want to let you all know that while the ACE is available to the scholarship awardees around the state, we have opened it up to a wider audience of the SPIA union members. I know there's a lot of new hires that were invited, so hopefully there's a lot here tonight. And to become a mentor or mentee, you could just visit our aerocareer.org and become an ACE ambassador, mentee, or instructor. So now we have Dawn. So before she starts, just a little something about her. She's a certified resume writer, and I said president of the Pathfinding Write-In Career Services. She has also authored Forget Job Security, Build Your Marketability, which provides a roadmap on how to manage your career. Dawn's relentless and tireless desire to help everyone understand the importance of actively managing their career. She also helps clients think about their careers differently by helping them actively manage their career destinies. Dawn's advice has been featured in OnePlus Magazine, careeralism.com, Talent Zoo, Chicago Tribune, CBS, and careerbuilder.com. When she isn't writing, she's teaching, speaking, or hiking in Oregon's spectacular outdoors, and she is also a dear mama to an abandoned fawn named Thor. Thank you, and everyone, please welcome Dawn Rasmussen.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. And I just want to make sure we're clear here that I am going to be speaking more on generalities about negotiations. And if you have some specific questions about contracts, we'll cover that later, especially during the breakout sessions. So if you can hold your questions about those specific questions on contracts, then that can be covered later, but I'll cover everything else. So I am so excited to be here today because you know what? The scariest thing is that most people spend more time thinking and researching about how they're going to buy a car or a house than they do actually researching the salary and the benefits they're going to be getting. And that's pretty startling because you kind of need to have the money in order to pay for the house or the car. So you got to think about what you do now and how you negotiate your salary will directly impact what kind of life you're going to lead, what kind of car you drive, what kind of house you have, and that kind of thing. So I'm always all about people trying to maximize their earnings potential. So understanding and negotiating your salary and your compensation like a boss, that is going to help you get where you need to be. So let's get started here because there's a lot of territory to cover, and I will encourage more general questions in the chat. We have some moderators who will pop in and let me know if you have a question. So let's get started. So negotiations, what you need to know before you actually get started into the negotiation process is that they actually start a long time before you even know it. There's going to be a lot of questions that you're going to be tossed either from recruiters or employers, and they're trying to go fishing to find out if you meet their salary levels. Well, similarly, unless it's published, a lot of us are always wondering, well, what is it that they're actually paying? So there's a little bit of tiptoeing, as we all know, that goes around as far as salary on how much they're going to pay, and they want to know how much you want. Interestingly enough, some states are starting to require companies to be much more transparent and actually publish their salary levels. And I pretty much throw up my hands and say hallelujah, because it is just as important that job seekers find out what the real bottom line number is too. Just so you know, do you really even want to spend your time applying to a job if you find out later that it isn't even within your salary range? And so it could be either too much or too less. So you got to figure that out. And so being more transparent is a good thing, I believe, when the states are requiring companies to do that. But most importantly is this is where you have to sit down and kind of think about what your number is before you start doing all the research and everything. But you have to know exactly where are you in your career, what do you need, and what's feasible. So you have to know what your number is. And I usually recommend a range. And so what is kind of the lowest number you're willing to accept? And of course, you know, we all want as much as we can get. So that higher number, you don't want to be unreasonable. Let's just put it that way. The other part too is you need to know what their number is. And so that's the employer's number. And whether they publish it or not, sometimes you can dig a little deeper and find out information. Sometimes you can do research and find out from people who work there already and maybe kind of like whether they are paying a competitive rate or not. Or it might be that they can fill you in that, yes, they work you very hard, but the pay's not that great. And you've probably heard of situations like that. Other places are very fair and reward their employees appropriately. So kind of getting more of a sense of what their number is, but really what you want to get at is what is the going rate? What is the actual competitive rate? So I'm going to drop in the chat here a quick little link for you to check out. But if you want to look at competitive salary surveys. There's a lot of websites out there. And so you might want to spend a little time figuring out which one's going to be the best use for you. But you can help you kind of do a comparison. So there's several different things you need to think about when we're talking about salary. Number one, where are you in your career level? So when we think about, are you an assistant, a coordinator, a manager, director, senior director, VP, EVP, or even C-suite? So those are all different pay levels. And of course, there's a million different slice and dice in the aerospace industry. I know that. So, but they all have representative pay levels that are kind of assigned to those levels. So you need to be clear on what you're what your salary level is, but then also what kind of tasks are you involved in? Are you in admin? Are you in project management? Are you in engineering? So there's a lot of different things at play here. And also how much experience you have. So these, that list that the link that I popped in the chat there will give you different salary calculator tools. And a lot of them are geographically adjusted so that you can go check it out and see, are you in a good place? And I know SPIA has some tools as well. And I think they'll talk about that shortly. But in order to really get kind of really well placed before you get started into the negotiations, you kind of need to know all the numbers and be ready to talk about that knowledgeably. So again, you have to spend more time than what you would in looking out how to research to purchase a car or a home or something like that. So you need to make sure that you do your legwork first. So then the next part is you want to figure out how to influence the decision makers into giving you what you want. And so I love this part because people hire who they like to know. And if they hire people that they like. And so if they feel like they can get to know you in the interview and you're, malleable but you're a pleasant but not too much of a pushover, as they say, they will generally, if they connect with you, there's more of a chance they're going to go to bat for you, especially if you're someone that they like. So you want to really focus on the decision maker and become as likable as possible and build rapport with that person. So they know that you're sincerely interested in that role and you're interested in them and you want to help them make their job a little bit easier, but at the same time, you are sticking to your points that you need. And that's absolutely fine. You want to demonstrate that you can be flexible, but you also have some non-negotiables, and that's totally fine too. But one thing you don't want to do is to try to play hard to get. Some people like to try to play games, and if the employer or the recruiter is playing games, then, I don't know. I just don't feel like there's enough time in the day to put that much energy in it but you definitely don't want to play hard to get on your end. This is brass tacks. So you have to be clear and be honest and forthright. So don't try to play games like, oh, I've got all these different offers on the table and that kind of thing. You need to focus on that specific opportunity right now. And you have to decide eventually, as we get through all this, do you want this job? Is this a go or no go situation? And that includes the salary or what they come up with. So another thing you want to do to influence decision makers is to help them see what you're worth and that you are worth that amount. So you want to be able to give a lot of really clear examples of business cases of how you delivered value. I hate to say this, but employers at the end of the day, they are trying to find the best person for the cheapest price. That sounds horrible, but that's exactly how business operates. They're not in the nonprofit industry or sector. They are trying to keep their budgets as low as possible while they're getting the best people. So in order to justify what you're going to be commanding as a salary, you need to be very secure on what you bring to the table. And that involves doing a lot of extra work ahead of time, thinking about those situations that show how you're a profit center, not a cost center. And so that's where you can provide those instances and cases and basically supporting documentation about how you're worth that amount. Another thing you need to be prepared for are tough questions. Probably the most difficult thing in all of our lives is to suddenly put a dollar amount on what we think we are actually worth. You know, we like to think, oh yes, I'd like $100 million, of course, but you know, when you really think about it, you know, we have some hopes and aspirations, but then there's also the reality. But you also have to be really honest and say, I am worth this, and not be overestimating or underselling yourself. I find a lot of people in particular tend to undersell themselves because I think the statistics are pretty high that most people don't even get into negotiations. They just pretty much agree to whatever the offer is, and that's it. There's no negotiation. So you need to be prepared for tough questions, and that will make you somewhat uncomfortable. But what you are doing is justifying yourself and validating your worth to that employer. So think about that. Now, when we go into the negotiations themselves, there's a stage that you kind of have to set. So there's different things that you kind of need to do to put some dynamics at work in the background. So one of the things you want to do is watch your body language. Nonverbal cues can send huge messages to the audience. So whether you're on the Zoom call or if you're in person, having open body language is much more, it actually showcases confidence and that you're relaxed. And if you're slouching, if you're kind of going like this and you're not feeling good about things, and that's how our bodies tend to react when we're not feeling good about things and kind of protect ourselves, that sends the wrong message, and you're usually not going to get what you want. If you have a more open body language, it's sort of a subliminal message to send that to the other person, that you're open, you're confident, and you're flexible. So it's just kind of interesting. You can do some reading up on body language in interviews. That's a very interesting topic, actually. But and negotiations too. So another thing you want to do once we're in the interview, once you kind of are being conscious of your body language, is you want to start kind of maneuvering the employer or the recruiter to middle ground. So there's nothing wrong with interjecting the conversation and say, we both want the same thing. So I know we can figure something out that works for best for both of us. And what that does is it signals your willingness to negotiate a win-win solution. And remember what I said, employers are trying to get the best person for the lowest pay. So your job is to move their needle up on the pay, and they're still getting a good person. So that's where you want to create the win-win. They're getting a great hire, but you're also getting paid what you're worth. And that's the middle ground you need to work towards. Another thing you want to do as you are kind of setting the stage for these negotiations is to kind of go over to the employer side, put yourself in their shoes. Think about kind of what they're anticipating through this discussion and what their pain points might be. The more you can empathize with them, they're going to connect with you, and they may capitulate back to you. And, you know, I'm not saying you need to butter them up, but finding a great way to flatter an employer is maybe something along the lines of, I value your opinion and am interested in what you suggest. So you're kind of asking them, it's like, well, what do you think? And of course, they're going to showcase their side, but you're also kind of tapping them to say, hey, I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on this. And it gets into a little bit deeper dive of the negotiation discussion. It also demonstrates your ability to see things from their perspective as well. So that can also win them over as well. So just kind of consider those things for setting up the stage for negotiations. Now, there is one thing that I always tell people about, and this is kind of like a little star pin. We can put this in here. There's one word that you never want to say in an interview and in negotiations, once you're kind of getting down to the final numbers and whatnot. One of our biggest knee-jerk reactions to something is just say, okay, and you may be in your mind thinking, okay, let's move on to the next thing, or, you know, let me think about it. Well, if you say, okay, you've just agreed to whatever they've suggested. So you want to avoid that term at all costs in the negotiations, because you don't want to accidentally agree to something that maybe you weren't totally done negotiating with. So you want to think of a different way to kind of handle that situation when your knee-jerk reaction is telling you to say, okay. Perhaps you can hedge and kind of say something along the lines of, And if they give you a really disappointingly low number, don't be afraid to say, wow, that number is substantially lower than the going industry rates. Is there any negotiation here? You can certainly do that, but then you haven't said okay. And you haven't just basically closed off that door already, because then you've lost all the negotiations. So you got to be careful about that. So when we get into the negotiations, this is when the employer will start getting really specific. I mean, there's different times where they will fish to try to get your number, as I mentioned, right when you're kind of in the beginning stages of even just the interviewing process. But when they start saying, well, we'd like to hire you, and so let's get down to the discussion here. So and you want to try to be very specific about that profit center versus cost center, and really think about the value of added to previous or current employers. And so if you need to, you want to bring up your competitive industry rate. This will help you justify your number once you start getting to that. You don't want to focus on your previous compensation rate, but instead focus on what the competitive industry salary is in the current job market. And so you want to basically gently nudge the employer into not looking like a cheapskate who underpays their employees. So Muse.com had a great script. I'll just kind of read it off to you, and I'm reading it verbatim from Muse.com. And so here's what they said, and I just love it because it's so perfect. So you can say something along the lines of, I'm really excited to work here, and I know that I will bring a lot of value. I appreciate the offer at $58,000, but was really expecting something to be in the $65,000 range based on my experience, drive, and performance, as well as the competitive industry rate. Can we look at the salary of $65,000 for this position? So that script there, and I'll read it again just so they have it. It's what you want to say. I'm really excited to work here, and I know I will bring a lot of value. I appreciate the offer at $58,000, but was really expecting to be in the $65,000 range based on my experience, drive, and performance, as well as the competitive industry rate at that level. Can we look at a salary of $65,000 for this position? So you're kind of pushing them in a corner, and there's a subliminal message there that you're like, I know what the going rate is, and you're awfully low. Do you really want to step in there? And if they're smart, I mean, most employers do have some wiggle room, as they say. And if you bring this up, you're most likely going to get a positive response, most likely. If you don't bring it up, then you're going to get $58,000 if you accept that job. And you think about it. So if there's a difference there of what, it's like 3, no, that's not right. 5, 8, 7, sorry. I'm not good in math, you are. The $7,000 difference per year times 10 years, that's $70,000 that you left on the table if you were there for that long. So just think about that. Whatever you negotiate now will impact the future of your earnings potential from this point forward. Because if you go low, then it's going to take you that much longer to negotiate or earn up, get the promotions and the pay increases up to where you could have started at. And so long-term, your earnings potential is being damaged if you do not negotiate. That's really important. So let's talk about some of the things that are absolutely core pieces of salary negotiations and negotiations in general. And so I think a lot of people forget some of these things. And so I really want to emphasize them here so that you can be aware of what all the pieces are. And a lot of times people will leave money on the table. So of course, when we talk about negotiations, what's negotiable? Well, we've got salary, you got to know your numbers, like I said. We talked about that. So insurance is big. That should include medical, dental, vision, life, and even short and long-term disability insurance. So what you're doing is, and especially in this era where a lot of companies are cutting back on health insurance, so you got to think about, instead of you're getting paid, you're actually not having to take money out of your wallet if you negotiate better insurance. So it's less premiums, costs, and less deductibles and all that kind of stuff. So insurance is definitely part of the equation. You also want to think about retirement planning. Some of these companies do have them, they have pensions and whatnot. But you want to make sure that you're talking to, asking questions about, well, what is your retirement or 401k or pension program, stock options or profit sharing look like? All of these can add up big time. So you want to think about that. And then also, this is the best part, is the vacation pay time off. And so it's really kind of interesting how vacation days and sick days are kind of coalescing into PTO, just sort of a general term. And a lot of times you can negotiate more PTO as an alternative if the employer won't budge on the actual salary, which is great. So maybe you, instead of 2 weeks vacation, you get 4 weeks vacation. So you got to decide, is that going to be worth it to you? And I think the pandemic had a huge impact on all of us, thinking about quality of life issues and, you know, do I want to be working as much, and maybe have some flexibility there as far as PTO. So kind of consider those 4 core areas of the main meat and potatoes of your negotiations. But there's a lot more stuff, and I'm going to talk about this now. So I'm going to jump right in here. So bonuses are on top of this. This is oftentimes forgotten because people just zero in on salary, and they assume that the bonus is part of the salary level. That's actually not often the case. So you want to think about the types of bonuses that are available or could be optional in your situation. So signing bonuses are huge. There are so many companies that are short staffed, and there's such a talent bleed right now, or even just lack of talent, that a lot of companies are providing first ever signing bonuses to attract employees. So think about that. There are some companies that are actually creating referral bonuses. So let's just say you get into a company and they're hiring, and you refer someone you know who's a great worker into the company. You could get a bonus if they get hired. And so basically it's kind of a finder's fee, so to speak, with employers thinking it good people know good people. So they are using that, your reputation and your work ethic, and assuming that you know somebody of the same ilk. So that will help you with money in your pocket. There's also holiday bonuses. We get that. There are also sometimes annual bonuses at the end of a calendar work year. And some companies do this because they figure if the company does well, so should the employees. There's also spot bonuses, known as the good job kudos bonuses. Those are given on the spot for a reward for exceptional accomplishment. There's performance bonuses. So if you have a specific KPI or a key performance indicator that you've exceeded, people may get rewarded for their productivity and or innovation. There are also retention bonuses. Some companies are so desperate for talent, they are trying to keep people. And so they are using retention bonuses to get people to stay on the job. And similarly, kind of at the end of, if you've hit a certain 5-year mark or 10-year mark or something like that, sometimes there's a tenure recognition bonus to staff. Those are all bonuses. So that's just all those different types of bonuses that you need to be thinking about and asking questions about in the negotiations. Another thing you want to do is think about professional development. This is so critical. You can nurture your career through professional growth and knowledge and skill acquisition. Companies can offer financial support for tuition reimbursement, conference attendance, industry certifications, and memberships like SPIA. So those are critical lifelines for you to continue adding to your body of knowledge and skills and abilities and furthering your career. So if you're not paying for it, that money stays in your wallet, and you actually benefit because you're gaining additional background. So you become a subject matter expert, and the employer's investing in you. So that's great too. There was also employee support programs. And again, I really want to emphasize, these are all things that you need to be negotiating. Employee support programs are going to be for people who need some additional, like they have relocation assistance, bereavement leave, parental family leave, medical leave, adoption assistance, flexible work, childcare, those types of things. So there's all those different options as well. Another thing you want to think about is some other things that you can ask for that are a little bit on the outer edge, limits of the universe here, but you should keep these in mind too as core compensation points. Sorry. So flexible spending accounts can be negotiable, paid time off for volunteer work, employee recognition awards. Sometimes they have incentives, just recognition, that kind of thing. They also have wellness program reimbursements, company related perks, like if your company makes a product and you get free ones to take home, although I don't think Boeing gives you airplanes to take home. Sorry. Sometimes they allow dog-friendly work environments, meal plans if they have an on-site employee cafeteria, gym memberships, cost of inflation adjustments, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I really want you to look at that. That was a huge question to ask right now. And even relocation. So those are some additional compensation negotiation points. But, there's also, because so many of us have been able to work from home, even remote work or flex schedules are something that people are enjoying. And I will tell you that any good boss worth their salt is going, and they're open to having flexible or work from home, remote work kinds of situations. They're going to watch and see if you do your job. If you do your job fine, they have no problem continuing on. I mean, I think they do get concerned about culture, like, if everybody's off working on their own thing, then, what's our corporate culture like? So that's a bit of a concern. But, if the work's getting done and you're doing your work when you feel like it and you are fulfilling all of your goals and everything, then, employer's going to be happy you're doing your job. That's what they want. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk about some negotiation techniques. I know I've been whipping through this pretty fast, but I do want to touch base, especially on one statistic that is absolutely startling. And Linda Babcock, who's the author of Women Don't Ask, reports that only 7% of women attempted to negotiate their first salary, while 57% of men did. Of those people who negotiated, they were able to increase their salary by over 7%. So that's pretty scary. And so I think that, and I've heard this over and over again, that even some employers just assume that women will not negotiate. They just don't do it. And that's fairly true. I hope to change this. And I hope that any women here, and anybody really, takes the time to do all this legwork so that you can negotiate, so you can really have a positive impact on your total lifetime earnings potential, because that does matter. So just keep that in mind. So you need to negotiate. That's my point there. So one of the things you want to do is to take a sincere, genuine approach that is clear on what you want, but you also have some room for compromise when you're negotiating. Expect the unexpected. Don't let that throw you off, and stay focused on your objective, getting what you want or what you require. And so how we do this, and this is really getting into the techniques here, is that you always want to try to get your number out first, which puts you in control of the negotiations. This is what we call the anchor, or the baseline number. And if you get your number out first, then the employer is the one who's going to be trying to negotiate down versus you trying to negotiate up. And so that's how you can start the conversation. They may say, well, what do you want? And so that's when you say it. You want to get your number out first, because that becomes, therefore, the basis of the discussion. And this is a little mind trick. I said, don't play games. Well, this is one little game you do want to play. So you always want to ask for more than you want, but you want to pick a very specific odd number at the top of the range. When presented with an odd number, the other party, the employer, will think you've done exhaustive research to arrive at that number. Plus, if an employer has to negotiate down, they feel like they're getting better value by saving money. So you just want to make sure that you get that number out first and have a specific number. So it could be like a lot of 3s or 7s or 5s or 1s or 9s. So just kind of think about that. Don't be afraid to ask that you're asking for too much. I mean, if you've done your research, you know what would be exorbitant and not therefore off the table. But the worst thing that can happen is they can say no. The next worst thing they can do is say they will not negotiate and only go with their number. So the best case scenario is that you will get more than what you wanted. So you have to be gutsy that way. But you also don't want an employer to lowball you. So just like you're going up, they're going to try to go low. So you want to make sure that you do get a fair amount. So that's where that middle ground comes into play. Because you know what? I don't know if anybody here has had this situation, but I did this a long time ago. I did not do a very good job negotiating in a job. And it took me a long time to earn back to where I should be. And in the meantime, I was sitting there grumbling and grinding my teeth saying, I should be paid a lot more than this. I know I'm worth more than that. So you have to remember you deserve what you're worth, and don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. Be willing to say no and walk away. You may be thinking, oh, that's fine. You know, you're not looking for a job right now, Dawn. And, you know, but you have to remember what the earnings potential loss would be if you go too low, and also kind of the mental like hit you take in your mind that like you're not being paid what you're worth, and that does have it bears down on you, wears at you, just so you know. The other thing you want to do when you're in the brass tacks of the negotiation for techniques is you want to clarify what you want as part of the overall negotiation. I just gave you a whole smorgasbord of all the different things that you could negotiate in there. So that's where you need to start at making other asks in terms of the benefits. And then you should be clear on what the importance of those are, so the employer does know where you stand. Of course, it goes without saying, you don't ever want to bring in personal issues or needs in negotiations. Keep this solely focused on professional discussion. So you don't want to bring in any family illness or anything like that. You just want to keep this totally focused on the professional side of things. And so the other thing you want to do is to make sure that you're using collaboration as a negotiation tool. I sort of touched on that, but you want to ask the employer, okay, here's what I want. This is what the price, my salary and my benefits. And then say, well, what do you have to offer? And so you're asking them to say, okay, well, here's where we are. And then you want to work towards that mutual solution. But this still is a negotiation. So don't let that connection tip out of your favor. At the end of the day, you want to make sure you find that common ground. And if you can't find common ground, then you're going to have to think about, do you really want this job or not? And it is totally fine to say that you need to think about it. But be fair to the employer by giving them a timely deadline for your response so they aren't left hanging. And I cannot emphasize this point more than enough, is that you always want to get any offer in writing. It does not count if it's verbal, over the phone or in person or over Zoom. You want to get something in writing, and any professional employer is going to do that. But at the time you finally are going to have to make a decision, you're going to be in a situation of like you are going to have to decide go or no go. Eventually a final number is reached and includes salary and total compensation package, and you may feel a lot of pressure, and you can't, you have to decide whether you're going to take it or not. And this really depends on your intuition. If you feel like you really are interested, then, but you may be reviewing multiple offers, and we all know about that. It's very frustrating because you're like, oh, I really want job A, but they're not interviewing yet, but I know I'm in the running for it, but job B is right now and they're going to make me an offer. So do I wait for A, or do I hang out for B, or what do I do? You have to treat everything separately and decide go or no go, because it never, ever, hardly ever lands that you get to make decisions in the order of your preference. You're going to have to make a decision. Okay, do I really want to work here? Yes or no. Go to the next job offer. Do I want to work there? Yes or no. And after you've done your negotiations. So you just don't want to string any employers along in an attempt to get more money. They see that through that ploy. So if you do need some time to think about it, or consider other job offers, just give them a reasonable window of time that they can expect your decision, so that you're not stringing them along, like I said. Now, When you accept it, yay, everybody's excited. Okay, I got my job. They're excited for the new employee. You've got a whole new world in front of you. It's very exciting. But there are times when it's fine to walk away. And I do want to talk about this because sometimes negotiations just don't go the way you want. So let's talk about a couple of reasons for declining a job offer. It might be that the salary they offered is too low. The benefits may not be what you need. You have certain intuition. Maybe something you learned in the interview turned you off. You could have that other offer that really is coming through. I have seen this many times, current employers counter offer. So you got to decide, well, do I want to stay where I'm at and, get a better deal, or do I want to send myself off into my next adventure? Another thing could be a commute time. I know Seattle in particular has really bad commute times. So there's that. Inflexible work environments are issues, as well as sometimes office culture or even the company's reputation. Sometimes, though, the job wasn't even what you thought, what you started interviewing in. And then by the time you're getting through the negotiations, you've had a lot more conversations about what the job involves, and it's evolved and is very different than the original discussion point. So maybe you should start thinking about whether you should not take that job. That's something to consider there too. And how to decline a job offer? Well, how do you walk away with integrity? And so sometimes you're in the middle of negotiations and you're like, okay, this is not going to be a good fit. Maybe take to that point that you're in the negotiations. Maybe it's how they're treating you. Maybe it's their numbers are throwing out, maybe the lack of benefits. It might be that you picked up on something that the personalities that wasn't sitting right. So you want to get through the negotiation. It's never a good idea just to get up and walk out, obviously. You don't want to show any distaste or disdain, but you need to keep your own counsel and just go through the process and just convince yourself you're going to take it, because you want to practice this. And that's the hard part, is that, for as many when you think about it's a numbers game, if for as many job applications you sent out, and then you narrow that down to how many interviews you've had, and then the next thing is how many second interviews have you had, and then maybe the last part is the job negotiation, the actual salary negotiations. That number of times in your life are fairly few. Most people's maybe 10 or 15 times in your whole life. So most people are not very good at it. So practicing it and going through the process is not a bad idea. And then you can feel a lot more confident. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the better and stronger it gets. So think of it as a good practice so you can get what you want when it really counts. So relax and go through the motions of the negotiations. And then, once you're done and you're in your own space, you can decide on your plan of action. But when you finally decide that you are going to decline a job offer, there's several things you need to do. Number one, you want to thank them. Declining a job means you're in the power position. And for that reason, you want to make sure they know that you appreciate their time and attention. So being generous and gracious are the classy things to do. Then you also want to tell the truth without getting into the details. So you want to tell the truth without telling the truth. So when declining a job offer and negotiations, after you've gone through all that, you need to keep your reasons for declining very vague. So do not get into granular nitpicking details that only pulls you in deeper. You want to say something very high level, something along the lines of, after a great deal of consideration, I've decided that this position is not the right fit for my career goals. Or it appears that the compensation levels are falling short of my needs and expectations, so I'm declining the job offer. Those are nice, classy, simple ways to close it out without getting into great details. And if someone presses you for more information, stand by your original statement by saying, beyond what I just shared, I don't feel comfortable discussing the interviews. Thank you for your attention. I hope you find the right candidate for this role. So it's a delicate dance, and nobody likes to say no, but sometimes you have to, just like sometimes they will come back and not give you what you want. So just be aware that you have to stand up for yourself. And if you don't want to have that kind of weight dangling over your head if you didn't negotiate and get what you wanted, or if it wasn't quite what you needed, that kind of thing. However, I do want to tell you that even if you decline a job offer, leave the door open for future possibilities. This is, you never know when karma can come back and either bite you or help you. Remember, people leave jobs and organizations can change, but that stuff that goes into HR file lives on forever. Sort of like Vegas, whatever goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, whatever goes on HR or salary negotiation stays in your HR file. So you never know when you may come back. There may be another change 10 years from now, and you're like, I really want to work at this company now. They've changed their leadership. It's very dynamic, and you really want to get in there, but you really want to make sure that you do everything right by the book. So you are, keeping a clean profile. You also want to make sure that you put any declines in job offers in an email versus a phone call, and that avoids any awkward questions asking for a deeper answer. And then finally, you want to be prepared for counter offers. When candidates end up declining a job offer, companies are so desperate to hire, they often think this is a game, and when you're asking for a counter offer. So you may go through negotiations, and then you say you're going to think about it, and then you say, well, no, I don't want this job. They're like, oh, well, we'll put more money on it. And it's like, well, you have to decide, be very firm with your decision and stick with your decision. You can say, thank you for your additional offer, but I've already moved on to other options. And while I appreciate interviewing for this company, my mind is made up. So it takes a lot of guts to do all this stuff, but you really have to be clear on who are you representing. You're representing yourself. You need to know your value. You need to understand your worth and be prepared to justify it. And stick to your points and don't let someone move you off your boundaries. But if you can collaborate with employers and work with them in terms of, okay, well, it sounds like we're in about the same ballpark, so let's talk about benefits. And so you can kind of add all those things in there too. So it's all about research. It's all about remembering that you have value. It's not that it's all one-sided. The employer does not have all the value. They're probably looking at you like, wow, we totally need this person on our team, and we absolutely need them, so our competitor does not get them. And so don't feel as though all the power's in their side of the equation. You have power too. So don't be afraid to stand up and negotiate for yourself, because that's really how you negotiate like a boss, is that you are confident and secure in what you bring to the table and how you're going to help that company. So I think I'm going to open up to questions here. That was pretty fast. Do we have any chats or questions here? Hello. Is our moderator there?
Yes, this is Linda. There was just one question about, is there any point where the salary difference is so high where the Muse.com prompt wouldn't work? Like, for example, $90,000 for a job that normally pays $120K.
You mean the normal market rate is so much higher than what the company's offering? Is that what?
Right.
Well, if that's what you found out and that's what they're offering, then that's ultimately your decision if you're going to accept that rate or not. It depends where you are in your career. Some people, and I do want to point this out, because, we all so focus on salary upward ticking of our salaries, but some people are just like, you know what, I have been the boss, I'm tired of being the boss, I don't mind a pay cut, I don't mind a job, lower job title, so I'm okay with that. If that is, that's fine. But it's sometimes it's not all about money either. So that's part of what you might say is like, okay, if it's 95, that's what you're paying, then let's talk about other benefits, because basically you want to be able to get as much as you can in terms of additional benefits that would get through there. So that's important to kind of consider when you're talking to them. Otherwise, if it's not budget, if they won't budge, and so it's like, well, is that $95,000 your low number? Are you willing to accept with that? Or are you willing to live with it and realize that if you're kind of sort of midway in your career, that'd be a pretty significant salary setback. So think about that. Looks like James has his hand up and I don't have a way to unmute him.
Hi, Dawn. Actually, thanks for the talk. I super appreciate all the nuggets you've dropped tonight. I've been taking notes, so thank you for that. Kind of the question that I have, I put in the chat probably directly, but I'll ask it in front of the group. So for California and Washington especially, right now the law is that they're starting to publish the salary range of the position. Does it make sense when you're applying for a job while looking at that to target the middle for future payment so that you're not on the upward end of the range, so you actually get a raise in the future versus, well, we hired you in way above the midpoint, so we're going to give you 2% or 1% or 0.5% for the rest of your term in this position?
That's a really good question. And so with that in mind, it really depends. And a lot of this has to do with where are you in your career. So if you truly are highly experienced and you can command that higher level, then you should go for it. Generally, sometimes companies will have cost of living increases. And as I mentioned, there's that inflation, basically the inflation part. Those are some questions to ask. You know, it's like, hey, great, this is my number, and they're like, okay. And so then you should be making sure that you are asking the question about, well, is there going to be a COLA, in maybe profit sharing or some other ways where you can increase the money coming in. So stock options, those can grow. It just depends on how each company is structured. If you are highly qualified and you go to mid-range, then yeah, you could go up, but why not get the money now? I mean, you know what I mean? I would suggest getting the money now. And then if the company is not able to budge and money becomes extremely important to you, then maybe you need to move on to another company. Or maybe you're getting promoted, and so you go to a different role and you get paid even more.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions out of this lively group? I know I've been talking for a long time here. Let's see here. So we have our moderators. Do you want to jump in, Raquel, or?
Yeah.
Or
and actually, Don, we did have just a mention of, Chris mentioned that he got an attractive salary offer a couple of years ago, but as he dug into the employee cost with regards to company contributions, 401k, it was actually a pay cut. So that's kind of a thing to think about too. You mentioned the other benefits and the
Yep.
vacation pay or health insurance. So that's definitely a good thing to see and not just focus on the salary.
Correct, because there's two things: the money going into your wallet and then the money that stays in your wallet versus going out. So you got to think about, you want to have a net gain versus a net loss, right? So that's where you need to keep on top of those things.
And Don, we just got another one from Oslog. Do you have to disclose current salary if they ask you?
That is a very fine line as far as legal terms. I've heard different things, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV either, but what I would say is you want to, if they say, well, so what are you making right now? And people will do that. They'll press you on that. So you can basically, any number that you throw out right now is going to be automatically used as your ruler for this job, especially if you don't even know what they're paying. So I always sort of advocate for trying to dodge this, because that should have no bearing on what this opportunity is. That should so you got to separate what you're earning now should not have anything to do with what you're trying to earn in this next job. As we all know, a lot of us get in the roles and we get handed thing after thing after thing after thing. So our jobs blow up expansively beyond the original job description. So we're doing a lot more. And, when we've had layoffs and things like that, a lot of people have actually had to do a lot more work. They laid off people, so I'm doing the work of 3 people, but I'm still earning the same salary. So that's why your current salary, it should not have any bearing on where you want to go. So you kind of want to nudge that conversation away from a specific number and just say, I'm confident that your company pays a competitive rate. So let's talk about the job and a little bit more about what, what the overall compensation package is. So you kind of shift that away from you disclosing something. It's called a deflection. And so that's why you're kind of changing the conversation topic away from you and focusing on them.
Okay, everyone. We want to thank you to Dawn, and she is offering a resume refresh offer, and it's we're going to have a link for the students breakout for it, and it's limited to the first 15 people, and mentees will have a priority. So this is a $55 value. So it's an opportunity to be able to meet with Dawn. I think, looking at your resume and having her provide some suggestions and recommendations to be able to review it. Thank you, Dawn. And then, so just some upcoming before we get to Ryan. So there's some events coming up in SPIA. We have the rock climb with SPIA young members on Saturday, April 8th. So it's free to the first 20 members, and you can sign up at the meetings at spia.org. And on the right-hand side here, we have some aerospace career enhancement classes coming up. For May, we have Acing the Interview with Kristen Hale. And participants will learn to reduce stress and anxiety before, during, and after the interview. So the registrations are open now for that. We also have First Aid CPR, both in Tacoma and Everett, on April 22nd and 29. And then the Python programming for engineers taught by Dr. Peng Ho. So it's a 3 8-hour class starting on May 13th. So there's virtual and in-person options available. And thank you, Justin, for putting the links on the chat. And next we have Brian Rule, who's going to be talking the SPIA part of the salary charts. So we do request that you hold all the questions for the breakouts after Ryan's overview. Thank you, Ryan.
So yeah, and I do want to also thank Dawn. That was a lot of great info. And one of the things that caught my attention was, Dawn mentioned the conference attendance. So I have to put in a plug for Ed Wells. The SPIA negotiated to get nearly $400 per person this year to the Ed Wells partnership to fund ongoing education, including conference grants. And so that's above and beyond what your management might provide. And so that's just one extra little benefit of SPIA negotiated contracts here. But I do want to start off here. So anybody who's not SPIA or who has a friend who's not SPIA, friends of SPIA can get salary info, right? So it's right on SPIA's homepage. There's a big red button over there. And on the friend of SPIA page that was mentioned, there's a click here, right? So click there and there's some salary information. For all of us who are SPIA members, it's right there on the SPIA homepage, member tools, salary charts, and the Boeing salary pools information. And so that takes you to a very complicated web page, but there's the main items are right here. The professional unit, technical unit, and Spirit Aerosystems are broken out. And then if you go to like the professional unit, there's a summary chart. Oh, I can turn on my laser pointer thingy. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, well, never mind. Anyway, so there's a summary chart here, and looking to see if there's a, oh, I don't want to mess it up. So maybe, no, Spotlight, is that going to do it? There we go. And so, yeah, so there's a summary chart, and then there's individually listed by job classifications and by skill code. And that does still work. Fantastic. So looking at the summary chart real quick, there's a major organization, and this one is Boeing Commercial Airplanes, BCA. And then there's the occupation code and the job classification. So in this case, 6B, 1B, and that's electrical system design engineer. And then 664 is the design and analysis engineer. And so the title, many of these titles are way too long. And so off to the right is a series of data representing these Boeing commercial airplanes, electronic system design and analysis engineers. So there's 483 of them, and then a bunch of averages. So we have 3% average increase for 2022. So this is last year's data. The new data will be coming out very soon. The average level, 3.4, average age, right? Service, and then the before and after compa ratio. So just briefly, the compa ratio is notionally the ratio of how much Boeing pays compared to how much Boeing is willing to pay or says they are willing to pay for a particular job at a particular level, right? So if you make exactly what Boeing says they want to pay, then you'll have a compa ratio of 1.0, and if you make 20% more than that, you would have a compa ratio of 1.2. And then critically here, or useful information here, right, is the average salary, and if applicable, a chart number. So you can see there's redacted information. If there's only one person, obviously we're not going to post that person's salary. And same thing if there's two. If there's two people, we're not going to post the salary. We're not going to have a chart showing that information. There are criteria. I don't remember if it's, we have to have 3 people or more to post the number on here. And to have a chart, we have to have, I don't know if it's 10 or 15, something like that. We came up with some idea to keep things more or less, still public, but also private, right? And then I just want to mention this is a tree structure, right? So all of these 3 things apply, these 3 skills apply to 6B, 1B, 1B applies to 6B, 6B applies to BCA. If you go on and you look at the major organization and you scroll down, you'll find eventually it changes. And so here's BDS, Boeing Defense and Space, and again, 6B, 1B, 664. Now there's only 49 people here. Their average age is 41.7 and their average pay is 148,000. So going back to this one, the average age in commercial is 43 and the average salary is 143,000, right? So in defense, the average salary is higher and the average age is lower, which normally in my experience, defense typically is older people getting paid more, but it's not always the case. The higher pay does seem to be pretty consistent. So I'm going to go into just that particular one because that's my job. I'm actually not in commercial anymore. I noticed as I was putting this together that I'm not on this chart because I got moved to software. But so for each of these, there are 6 charts that you just saw. And this first chart here, I've got some Zoom stuff in the way. I don't know how to hide this. Apologize here. There we go. So this one shows the number of people that make and how much money in each pay band, right? So how many people make $76,000 to $84,000? Well, it's over 10 here, 11 or 12, and a level, right? So these are level 1s. They're very narrow, 2 pay bands. Everybody earns between 76 and 92,000 as a new hire in this particular job. Level 2 is highly concentrated in this one pay band, right? They really like paying people this much as a level 2. There are a few people that are a little bit lower and a few people that are quite a bit higher, but it's still pretty, heavily focused on this one. The vast majority of level 2s earn in this pay band. Level 3 is more of a normal distribution, and then 4 is also, and then 5 and 6 is pretty flat, but it spans a wide pay range, 172,000 to greater than 236,000, right? It's a substantial pay range variation here. And so the second chart here, this is chart B. This one is this compa ratio again. So this is kind of a weird thing, but you can see how much people are paid, how many people are paid in each different compa ratio bracket, right? So it's like several stacked distributions because the levels, Boeing has their notional pay per level to be different, right? And so that's what sort of offsets the stack that restacks the levels. It makes them spread out, right? So the level 1s fairly narrow, level 2s a little bit wider span, and then 3s. There's a number of level 3s below this 1.0. That makes me a little nervous about why they're paying less than what they say they are willing to pay for that job. Potentially they just got promoted, and that's why the pay is lower there. So anyway, this is a very confusing chart sort of to look at. So most of the people like to look at some of the other ones. I want to mention both of those 2 slides have this table, the same table down below, and this has a lot of useful information. The number of people per level, which the summary chart does not have, There's 3 level 6s, right? So there's a good chance if historically this job has had similar numbers of people and always had small numbers of level 6s, you're probably not going to get a level 6 in this job. I mean, just being realistic here. But there are a lot of level 4s, so and a fair number of level 5s, right? And so you can see the average pay for each of these different levels. And here's where this comp ratio comes from. Boeing's market reference. This is the number I was talking about. It says this is what Boeing notionally wants to pay for this job in this level. $83,000 for level 1, $101 for level 2, and so on. The minimum is actually just 70% of this number, rounded to the nearest thousand. The high market is 25% above this number, rounded up to the next thousand. And so they're not really representative of a true like high, like a cap or anything like that. It's just a reference. This is the number that Boeing manipulates the most, and that's what they come up with, and that's what they publish internally for all the different jobs. And then our actual real numbers are here. These are useful when you're trying to look at comparing jobs from one to the next, right? So the median, this is the middle pay for a particular job and level. So half of the people make above this, half of them make below this. And then the lower bounds and the upper bounds, and then the actual average increase, right? So here, Boeing emphasized level 2s. They gave extra money to level 2s, and they took some money, didn't give as much to level 1s when the pool was 3%. So anyway, we'll move on here. This is complicated here. On the top left, we've got how many people got what increase as a dollar amount, right? Number of people, the salary increase that they received here, and so it's fairly spread out with a kind of focus in the middle here. But when you look at the second chart here on the top right, it's how many people got what increase as a percent. This is kind of interesting to me because last year there was a 0 minimum guaranteed raise, and so the pool was 3%, meaning everyone in total got about 3%. And yet the range of raises was 2 to 4. Almost everyone, look, 461 people got 2 to 4%. 5 people got less than 2, and only 17 people got greater than 4 in this entire fairly large group of people. So that's showing that Boeing really tries to smoosh people into the middle, and that's that with a 0 guaranteed minimum. We can see that their system still does that, still pushes people in the middle. The bottom left here, and that was right there. Yep. So that was showing the smushing in the middle. The bottom left one is the age distribution, and this is useful to see if you're considering changing jobs, especially how many people are what age in the job you're going to or the job you're coming from, right? So if there are a bunch of people, in this case, 131 that are eligible for retirement, assuming anyone here has at least 10 years of service, that's a lot of people. That's more than a quarter of the population of this group, and they're ready to walk out the door on any bad day, potentially, assuming financial fitness, whatever. So this is potential. If you're mid-career, this is a really good opportunity for, or it appears to be, just from the numbers, for promotion and advancement. If you're a new person, well, you're competing with all these other new people because they've actually started hiring them up. There are some jobs where it ramps up. There's some jobs where there's very few people at the beginning and then a lot of people at the end. And there's a lot of these sort of bimodal jobs. This chart on the bottom right is just the number of people based on how many years of Boeing service they have. Service, strictly, as far as I understand, is Boeing years of service. This chart is hard to look at, but really, so the red line here is this market reference that we've been talking about, the what Boeing wants to pay people. The blue dashed line is our median. That's where people are above or below, half the population is above that, half the population is below that for this particular job. And so the only thing I really look at here is when the red line isn't smooth in some jobs, the red line is very low for the first 3 levels, and then it jumps up and is high for the next 3, or when the red line falls below the blue line quite a bit. This is kind of getting to a pretty good gap here. That makes me nervous that it may be difficult for even the Boeing management to give decent raises to these people, because the Boeing compensation is saying this is the number that should be our reference, the red line. And so Boeing management has to fight to get extra money. So that's all I wanted to mention there. This one is, again, compa ratio and percent salary increase. So if you look at this, basically anybody that's got a compa ratio of 1.0 or greater and a salary increase above the pool, in this case it was 3, this is a really good place to be. This means you were recognized. You know, this person out here got a 3% increase, even though they're way above what Boeing says they should be paying, right? 1.34, something like that. So they're 34% above what Boeing says they want to pay for that job, and they still got the full pool. They didn't get knocked down, right? And then in the bottom left here, this is kind of the not so good place to be. And anything kind of on the diagonal in between is not too bad, because Boeing's computer system, the salary tool, is going to automatically give people that are higher paid a smaller raise, and people that are lower paid a bigger raise. It's just pushing people towards the middle. And then the last chart here is the one that a lot of people like to look at, especially when there's like 40 or 50 people in the group, because then there's far fewer spots, and you can actually sort of figure out, you know, some people like to figure out who their coworkers are, and hassle them about that a little bit. So anyway, I usually use this chart because these black lines, as it says, are based on all the professional unit members. And so this 50th percentile curve is based on the whole population. And so if you look at a job and you see all the dots, or most of the dots, or many of the dots, whatever, are above these curves, then that's a good sign that that job has consistently received more funding than the rest of, you know, sort of the average population, right? Because this is the age and salary, right? So you're looking at new hires here, senior people here. You know, people are sticking around in this job past 70 years old, and they're not just lower paid people that didn't, you know, that for whatever reason are staying around. There's people making decent, really good money and sticking around. And then I do want to mention, just like the 70 is not the cap here, the 240 is not the cap here. These people, I don't know how much they make, but it's probably more than 240. The cap's just limited. Both of those last two charts have a similar table on them as to the first two, but there's this extra couple of columns, the number of reclassifications and out of sequence raises, and the average increase for such an out of sequence raise. And I just want to mention here, this is an opportunity to see, you know, if you get a promotion from a level 2 to a 3, or 3 to 4, there's a pretty good raise. There was a pretty good raise given out in the previous year. And so if you look at historically, you know, these charts year after year, and you see small numbers on certain groups from one level to the next, or large numbers, that might be a sign of what could happen if you're close to a promotion in that job. And then, you know, the last thing I just want to mention here is the SPIA Spotlight magazine has a lot of information here. This is a clip of it. There's a digital version, and every year there's quite a bit of information published, and it's available to anyone. And it's usually in April, or sometimes it's in May. And then I've had many charts to compare lots of different stuff, or answer questions during the breakout session. So we'll be looking at we'll be going to the breakout sessions next.
And thank you very much.
Yeah. All right.
No worries. And Justin will be providing a link for the breakout rooms. So we have them divided into these different locations within the Puget Sound. So whichever one you want, whichever one you're working in, please pick that specific breakout room. And then those who are non-union or students, please pick the last one, and me, April, and Dawn will be in there. And also, I think if you guys have gone, you can definitely leave after the breakout room. There's no need to come back to the main group here.